My name's Paul Caporn and I'm an artist, for want of a better description of what I do, yeah. I'm still formulating an idea. I've kind of had a few thinks about it, over the last year. Then that's kind of changed. Because it's sort of the notion of play to win. Originally I was kind of a bit disturbed by that idea because I don't really like the idea of competition. Although I sort of understand, Tom and I have had a bit of a discussion about that, and it's not really the kind of intent of the idea of the show, but the title does sort of allude to that. Obviously I just like the idea of playing for the process of playing itself. I think that's the interesting thing for me as an artist. So my first impressions of the collection of Mark's is works that he's collected, because it's kind of interesting because it's his own private collection of works that from, I suppose at the time it was kind of considered the other or kind of exotic. So, and obviously his generation of artists kind of collected those objects. It's very different, obviously, to artists that are contemporary artists. We can't kind of draw unless we're part of that culture, we can't kind of draw our particular positions from, those kind of traditions. I mean, particularly, I'm a Western, middle-class white boy, so it's sort of, I suppose my first impressions of the collection itself is that, it's quite amazing. They're beautifully made and produced objects. And actually the capacity, I really enjoy the fact that we can get quite close to them and see the process of the maker, because that's, you don't see that in pictures. I've seen pictures of most of those objects, but you can't. There's lots that you can miss. So it's good to have the opportunity to look at it closely. Yeah, pick it up, have a handle of it, and, well, not that I did that, but, yeah.
So were there any works that resonated with you?
I think probably the spoon, in a way, which is kind of interesting, because a lot of those objects are sort of, they had some kind of utility. My work is, personally, I'm kind of interested in the idea of utility in terms of, what might be the function of art, what might be the function, obviously in different cultures it has a different kind of, connection to, the way, obviously in Indigenous cultures it was something that everyone did. It was part of their expression of their, how they see the world. As a collection it sort of does, and probably more about the idea of collecting, how an artist might collect works from other people and then generate sort of work from that. I've kind of done work that's a bit like that. I've actually specifically set up sort of mini museums. So I had a VW that I turned into a mini museum and collected work from friends and other artists in the particular exhibition that it was in. And it's sort of, it's a different kind of approach to, because a lot of these objects have been purchased, and this is more like once these objects sort of finished in this museum in a VW, they were given back to the people that own them. So it's sort of, I don't know. So it's sort of, the ideas, I don't draw the ideas specifically from the objects, if that makes sense. But the art, that's it. That's kind of my interest is more in that, and it sort of has been for 30 odd years because I've worked in institutions and, seen those practices and understand a little bit about how that sort of functions. I think particularly for those sort of artists, they would collect stone. I'm making an assumption because I'm not in the mind of those artists, but it appeared that they would kind of collect some of these objects, and then they sort of, the surrealists were obviously about dreaming, so they would, sleep on it and then come up with a response, With the exhibition that we're doing to play and win, I guess there's a series of themes that Tom's come up with about mnemonics and education. I'm actually really interested in the mnemonic kind of side of it, I suppose, in the way that an object can create, you can use an object to help interpret a narrative, I suppose, of ideas that mostly, they're not written, they're just spoken about. And it's obviously a good way to remember things, I suppose. And I kind of like that idea, because even with modern objects, you can look at an object, and in the object, its markings will have a history that's over time, that's built up because of the markings on the object. So, and if you've got that object in your family, that object then kind of becomes a representation of the history of your family. So, yeah. I guess in terms of the production of where I'm heading, I'm thinking the mnemonic kind of idea is quite interesting for me. Sort of, in a way, I sort of see the objects as less important than the relationship to the people that have the objects and their use of the objects. So it's sort of back to that idea of utility, I suppose. We make objects, but why? What's the importance of them? And it's usually to do with some kind of narrative or idea.